welcome back. So we went through Zimt's particular journey in getting to our current manufacturing space. So interesting. And then we also talked a little bit of all the routes one could take to get a product to market. And I would say that they have some similarities for most of them, but the two starkest in contrast would be making a product yourself in-house and having a co-manufacturer. So what a lot of folks maybe don't necessarily know is that most brands that one sees on store shelves, the brand itself, the owner, the company, they don't actually make that product. They contract out to another manufacturing company or a manufacturing company to make that product for them. This is very different from in-house manufacturing where you got to do it all yourself. And there are pros and cons to each that I think we don't think about this stuff because we don't have to. Oftentimes we don't even really make our own food or products in general. Let's just delve into it to see kind of a BTS of how we actually get product onto store shelves, to web stores, etc. In-house manufacturing, okay, let's just talk about the pros first because there are actually some pros. There are some good aspects to it. One is you got greater flexibility for creativity. And this is something I really wanted to explore when we had our Clark Drive location because we had so much front facing capacity, right? Like we had a little cafe, we could do like little test products, see how the market responded, and potentially scale up from there so that it could become like a consumer packaged good. So like packaged and going to like a distributor or something. That didn't super work out well because very few people came to our cafe. The other pro is like you have a lot of decision-making ability in real time. So I know that with co-manufacturing, while the majority of our experiences were positive, there was one experience where I remember the cacao they used, it wasn't quite processed in the way that I liked, or maybe it was a batch that I didn't like that I wanted to avoid that they used anyways. And I was like, this is just not an acceptable product. I remember opening up so many packages with my Oma actually, and mom I think, of these bars that have been wrapped already in our compostable packaging, and they all had to be redone. It was, I mean, I think it was worth it because it's like, it just provides like for a more reliable product that people actually like, but you know, it's a bummer, like you don't see it in real time. That does actually happen here too, right? Like if we have someone a little bit newer or maybe who has forgotten a step, product gets messed up and then it all has to be reprocessed. But typically like you can catch it much easier in-house before it goes to market. Whereas with a manufacturer, you don't always see that. Like sometimes you find out when a customer emails you about product not being quite right if you didn't get to sample that batch yourself. More flexibility, more creativity, also more real-time decision making. That's a lot of the pros for manufacturing in-house. The other things I will say is like there's less risk for cross-contamination. So like we're a vegan facility transitioning to be a vegan and gluten-free facility. Those are not the same thing. And you know, I love that we don't have any dairy products in the facility. And that is for like, yes, dairy intolerances, dairy allergies, but I also, I don't know, is it like good juju? I don't like having like secretions from tortured animals in our facility. I enjoy that. I enjoy the lack of cross-contamination. You know, there's always these little like allergen labels saying like, oh, you know, there could be, I don't know what the word in English is, traces of like milk ingredients or whatever. And I know, I know that like based on the equipment that at least our old co-packer used, I can see where there would be that risk for cross-contamination. Like potentially if a tiny piece of the equipment didn't get cleaned out well enough, or, you know, some co-packers just really cover themselves well and know that there's probably like there's a good chance of there being some cross-contamination within the product, but they just disclose that so as to avoid any legal issues. So not having those like allergens or unethical products playing a role is a big reason as to why I like having things manufactured in-house. And even things like the sink, like stuff getting sprayed out on the sink, like that also leaves risk for cross-contamination. Also things like waste disposal. I mean, because we are like very, very low waste facility, that's something important too. Like I like to just keep track of where everything's going, how everything's composted, recycled, different categories, all these sorts of things, limiting waste. So that's one of the reasons why I like having things manufactured in-house. The other thing is too, is like, I know people really aspire to work from home, and I can see benefit to that for sure. I love having somewhere to go to work, to like really feel like I'm getting things done in a different capacity other than exclusively on like the digital front of things. Like I love, this is one of the major things about having things in-house that I really like, and this is just me as a person and what I enjoy. Like I love seeing product form, and I love like working through problems, maybe with machinery and stuff. Sometimes it's highly inconvenient, but that sense of accomplishment of, you know, seeing a product form from a bunch of random inputs to like something you could buy on a store shelf is, I think it's super cool. And like seeing all the little stages that go through with it. And so those are like the pros for in-house manufacturing. There are a lot of cons, but we're going to turn those into pros for working with a co-packer. One of the big ones that comes to mind for me is labor. Labor is huge. Our experience has been, or my experience has been, when you work with a co-packer, they take care of all the labor, right? Like you are not responsible for that, which is, it cannot be overstated how important that is, because labor is people, and people are people. They're complicated in every single facet. It is so rare to just get like reliable people who can kind of keep things moving, and they don't cause a lot of trouble. They're so fantastic. Like we love those people. But again, very rare. So if it's all up to a co-packer, that's for them to deal with. You don't have to deal with any of that, which is incredible. The thing with co-packers, they often have like way more efficient equipment. So like our stuff here is fine. Like it's good quality equipment. It's not really that automated. Typically co-manufacturers, they've got like a bunch of clients, they've got much higher volume. And so like this is more a pro for them, but the stuff is a lot more automated, and that can result in a much more uniform, consistent product if they use the equipment right. That's not always what happens, but if that is, which can be good for your customers. The other thing from a manufacturer's perspective, or like a brand's perspective, I should say, is in working with a co-packer, they often can realize other economies of scale. So not just with the equipment and the volume that's getting pumped out, but the volume that's being purchased of raw materials. So you can realize different price breaks if you work with a co-manufacturer, because you're probably doing some cross-use of ingredients and things like this. Incredible. I think the biggest pro to working with a co-manufacturer, other than the labor, is that you don't have to pay up front for all of this equipment. The equipment is extremely expensive. I think it's like becoming a little bit cheaper now that, you know, at least in this sphere, so many companies have tanked and there's a lot more availability of used equipment on the market. But it's something you don't have to deal with. You don't have to deal with equipment breakdowns. I mean, I did, because that was, you know, a unique situation with our co-packer. But typically, like, that's all on them. Like all the equipment maintenance, all the breakdowns, yeah, just like making sure it's up to snuff. You don't have to worry about that. Insurance, like you don't have to worry about insuring different random pieces of equipment. There's so many pros to working with with a co-manufacturer. Ultimately, it's so easy. It's like I said in the other video, it's kind of like being on vacation. You don't do any of the heavy lifting. You don't have to do any of the facility maintenance. You don't have to do any of the hiring. You don't have to do any of the record keeping. You don't have to do any of the quick thinking during manufacturing, because there's a ton of that. And I mean, if they've got, equipment that's up to a certain scale and they're up to a certain scale, then you have less of that need. But like for small scale manufacturing, let's say you were going to take the other approach and bring everything in house, like, oh my God, there is so much rapid fire, like, okay, here's a problem, we have to deal with it constantly. Other thing, and this is actually like a little bit painful for me right now, is if you don't have demand for a product for a few months, you don't have to place an order with your co-packer. I mean, yes, you need to give them enough notice to fit you into their manufacturing schedule, but like, you don't have individuals to keep employed. Like, that's not your responsibility. Right now for us, like, we don't have the purchase order where we typically rely on for scheduling people. And so I am just forecasting as best I can and trying to get my people work, even though there's nothing on the horizon that, really warrants these many people to be employed. But I don't want to lose these people. So yeah, keeping the team employed, like, that's something else you don't have to worry about. I will say this though, if you do go with a co-manufacturer and, your own individual levels of trust can come into play here, you may get screwed. Like, they could just be like, you know what, we're ending this relationship. Typically, co-packers, like, you have to sign an agreement with them and they should adhere to that. But if things go really, really wrong for them, I mean, you may not have a backup plan because there may not be any other co-packer, and setting up your own facility does take some time. Speaking of which, one of the other pros, in addition to not having to, research and purchase and learn all this equipment, is if you work with a co-manufacturer, you're not setting up your own manufacturing facility. Same thing goes for if you're working in a commissary. I know that different parts of the world have different regulations or lack thereof, but what I can say is this part of the world, as in the lower mainland, is notorious for just being like the most illogical, sticklery situation for setting up anything food manufacturing, restaurants, manufacturing facilities, catering, you name it. There are so many obscure and ambiguous regulations. Nobody knows what's going on. That's something I really experienced when we had our Clark Drive location. It was a nightmare dealing with the city, like an absolute nightmare. And even this location, a nightmare dealing with the city, because I don't know why, just nobody knows what's going on. They don't necessarily understand these vague regulations that are in place. It's a little wacky. So those are some of the main, pros and cons of doing things in-house versus working with a co-packer. And I think overall, like, I would still prefer to keep things in-house so long as the team is good, which, again, whole other video in and of itself. If you don't have a good team, like, you're kind of screwed at a certain point, which is why I'm like making up work for them, because I really want to keep them, and they've got rent and all these things. So, okay, that's about it. Yeah, so co-manufacturing versus in-house production. Curious as to your thoughts. Curious if you knew of any of this stuff to begin with. Did I scare you away from having your own consumer packaged goods brand? I hope I did. I'm just trying to share the good and cautious word out here. You could get like a work from home desk job. It's not always easy, but you're not going to be like potentially injuring yourself putting equipment together, getting electrically shocked. That's happened a few times. Don't like that. Don't recommend it. Okay, thanks guys.